These are Japanese saws. What sets a Japanese saw apart from all other hand saws is that they cut on the pull stroke. And in so doing, you don't get any binding of the blade. And you can also, because you're cutting on the pull stroke, you can also make the blades much thinner. And this saw, for instance, the plate here is 11 thousandths of an inch thick. The kerf is 15 thousandths of an inch thick. So you can get some very fine cuts with this. Plus the kerf on the teeth is very small, so you have much more control when you're cutting. It doesn't wander as much when you're cutting on line. And they're just amazing saws. They cut very straight and they're just a joy to use. These are made by Zetsaw of Japan, who has been making saws for decades. And they are, this is called Dozuki, which means it has a spline on the back, which actually allows the blade to be even thinner because you've got some support on the back here. And this one has about a 9-inch blade. Overall, it's about 21 inches. This has a 6-inch blade. This has, overall, I think is 14. But these saws would make excellent dovetail saws. So I'm going to do a couple cuts with them and show you a couple tricks on how to get the best use out of them. Let's make a cut. So when I start my cut on the far end of the board, and I get it started, and then I extend that line across the face until I get to the front, and then I can drop down on the front and finish my cut. Remember here, you don't need to put much pressure on the saw. Basically, the weight of the saw will cut through this board. So there we have it. I lost a piece, but that cut's very smooth, and it took almost no effort to get through the cut. Here's a trick you can use if you need a very precise line, like a really square cut. Take your square and then scribe a line with a marking knife, and then take a sharp chisel and just cut to that line and just cut a little shelf out. So now what I have is a little shelf there, and that little shelf, my blade can just fall right in that shelf. And now when I cut, I have a reference and I can get a very square cut. So now that cut's very square. Another situation where these Japanese saws shine is if you're trying to cut a compound angle. So let's say that I'm trying to cut this angle. I have no idea what it is. I just set it and I mark it on my piece here. And then I mark it down here. Okay. So there's a different angle on the face and one down here on the front. So I take my saw and I score a line. I just start the cut and then I flip my piece and I score a line on this side. So now I have two lines. Now, if I go to make my cut, my saw will be guided by these lines. So I'm going to start my cut over here, and then those curves guide the saw. So now what I have is I have a perfect compound cut. Now I could do this on the saw. I could set it up. There'd take several test cuts, and it would take a lot of time, but I just cut a compound angle very quickly with the Japanese saw. Quickest way I know how to do it.